So I thought I'd talk today about how to do a partial seam in a block. So I've got a block here that I've already made one of. Well, I've actually made a few. And I just thought I'd just show you, because this is a very innocent looking little block. It looks quick and easy, and so it is. However, it has a little snag. Have you ever noticed how the simplest things in life have a little snag to them? Anyway, so what we're going to do is start off, we've got some squares and strips. So this block's going to measure 8.5 inches, so it'll be an 8-inch finished block. And so to do that, we need some squares and strips. So the squares would be 4.5 inches cut, and the strips for around the outside are going to be 2.5 inches wide, so great for 2.5 inch strips, and 6.5 inches long. So the little snag is that it looks innocent enough, but it's going all the way round, so there's kind of isn't one long seam to get right the way through things. So we have to do a little partial seam to get started on this. So I'll show you what we're going to do. I've already cut out some strips and squares, and I'm using some very delicious ombre fabric. They change colours, which is kind of exciting. So I'll just show you how we get started on these blocks. I've got my centre square cut here, and I've got my 4 strips here. So to get started, it's really a very simple matter. We need a strip and a square, but they're not the same size. So we're going to put them right sides together as usual. We're using a regular 1/4 inch seam, but we're just going to sew part of that seam. You don't want to come all the way along to the end of the square. You just want to come about halfway. So if you're working with smaller pieces, you might come a little bit less, but don't stop too soon after you've started, because you've got to be able to get into it later. I'll show you that when we get to that point. So initially we're just going to sew about halfway along the square, so a couple of inches or so. So as I said, regular stitch length, regular pretty much everything, just not doing the full seam. So with there, and I like to press in between everything. Let's get my little leader off there. So we've got this, but it's not, again, pressing becomes an issue. How do I press that seam? Well, all we're going to do is just press part of it. So we're just doing part of a seam, part of a pressing. So I'll bring the iron over, and we just want to press maybe the first inch. No more, because we've got a couple of inches of sewing there. Just press that. Press the seam out towards the strip, away from the square, and don't press the whole piece, because we'll need to come back and do that later. We don't want it fully pressed just yet. So now we've done our partial seam. So if you're going to be making several of these blocks like I have here, you might think, oh, I'd like to chain piece them. Well, I'm sorry, this little part you can't chain piece. However, all the rest of the bits that we're about to do, or most of the bits till the very last one, you could chain piece. So if you are wanting to make several at a time, I would suggest that you do all these little partial seams first, and then you can continue on doing some chain piecing. So what we're going to do now, we've got our partial seam there, we've pressed the end so that where we stitch over that is pressed, and our next strip we're going to add on. So if we start at the beginning of the square there and come all the way through, that should match nicely at the other end, and we'll just sew the next seam. And now I'm going to press that seam. Again, press all the seams out away from the square, so out into the strip. Just mind that you're not pressing that piece that we had there. Press that one nice and flat. And then we're going to come and do exactly the same thing. So we're now just turning the block around and around, and we're going to come down this next side here. Now we're going to be back to the iron again, press the seam, and as I said, if you're chain piecing and doing multiple blocks, you can just do them all in their little groups and press all these at the same time. And then we've just got this last piece to put on, and now you can see why we've got this little bit hanging around up here. We're going to put this one down here, just the same as the others. So it doesn't take too long to make this block. And there's other blocks that have partial seams in them as well. Anything that kind of looks like it's rotating, there's a possibility we'll have one of these partial seam so that you can get that full around look. Because otherwise we tend to do something like you know, 2 strips either side and 2 shorter ones here, or we might do a sort of a log cabin where it steps around. But this one, they're all the same size, but it just needs this little bit of help here. So press that seam out now. These fabrics that change colour are just delicious, aren't they? I've had them in my little stash for a while and I thought it was time to air them. So now I've got to this point, we've got all our pieces on and we've just got to come back now and finish that seam off. So when I mentioned when we started, you don't want to stop yourself too short because you've got to get your sewing, that under your sewing machine foot. So you want to leave enough room to be able to do that, and then we can just finish that seam off now, just the same as all the others. So again, we wouldn't be able to chain piece this one because we've got to start part way down a seam. However, it's a small sacrifice for a nice block. So don't be daunted by a partial seam, it just means a little bit of a seam now and a little bit later on. Press this again. So now we can finish pressing that whole seam all the way and press the whole block, and that's the block already done. That didn't take so long, wasn't so hard. And you could go on making, of course, as many blocks as you like. I thought I'd have a little bit of fun. I've made some alternate blocks using the same colour in the middle, which is a very soft grey, and I've used a darker grey so I can alternate them. These are kind of fun blocks. You could have different fabrics, you could be showcasing all sorts of different things, but I thought it would be quite nice to alternate them with something. Partly because I'm using so many bright colours here, I thought perhaps they needed to have a little bit of relief, which they will get by having these alternate squares, and I have to make a few more. However, I'm quite pleased with the way that's looking. And that's how you would do a partial seam in a block, so that you can get that nice sort of going around type look. And as I said, there are other blocks that require that. Homework could be that you could find some other blocks that require that. However, I just wanted to show you how to do it. So not to be frightened by having to do a partial seam or wondering how you're going to do it. You just do the partial seam, come back and finish it off at the end. And there's your block. Thank you.